Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraft woman Sarah Dean. We warmly welcome the family of Private William James McKean, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome representatives of the Currumbin Palm Beach RSL in attendance this evening. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection. By family, visitors to the memorial, and Australian Air Force cadets, number 305 Squadron from DY, New South Wales. If you are able, I now invite you to stand and please join in singing the National Anthem.
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
If you are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private William James McKean. William McKean was born in December 1872 at Corrindip in regional Victoria. Known to his family and friends as Jim, he was one of 11 children born to Scottish immigrants William and Christina McKean. In 1875, the family relocated to the newly settled seaside town of Port Campbell in Victoria's Great South Coast region, where William's father took up farming. The family remained here throughout Jim's life. He and his siblings attended the Port Campbell State School, and after leaving school, Jim worked as a baker. He was an active member of the village at Port Campbell, including 14 years as a member of the local rifle club. Jim married Mary McRae in 1900. 2 years later, the couple took over running the family farm known as Roslyn. Jim and Mary had 8 children: Leslie, Mary, Donald, William, Jock, Robert, who died in infancy, Elsie, and Ruby. Jim was the first of 4 McKean brothers to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force. Although he had promised Mary he would not leave her to manage on her own until their youngest daughter Ruby turned 2, Jim signed his enlistment papers on the 9th of August 1915, 2 months shy of Ruby's 2nd birthday. Jim was 43 years old. Entering camp at Royal Park in Melbourne, Jim was allotted to C Company of the newly raised 29th Infantry Battalion. After 3 months of initial training, he departed Melbourne in the troop ship Ascanius on the 10th of November 1915, bound for Egypt. Jim arrived in Egypt in early December 1915 and continued to train in the camps outside Cairo. His battalion left Egypt for the Western Front in mid-June. After a quiet few weeks adapting to life in northern France, the 29th Battalion fought its first major battle at Fromelles in July. One soldier from the battalion wrote, "The novelty of being a soldier wore off in about 5 seconds. It was like a bloody butcher's shop." After the fighting, the 29th Battalion withdrew to billets in the town of Fleur Bay. Here, Jim was reunited with older brother John, who was taken on the strength of the battalion, having enlisted in March 1916. By this stage, 2 of Jim's older brothers, Alec and Norman, had also enlisted. Jim and John remained together through August and September 1916 as the 29th Battalion alternated between manning the trenches and resting behind the lines in billets. By early October, the battalion was holding the line in the trenches outside Armentières. The unit diary for this period noted that both the enemy's and our artillery were active throughout. On the 12th of October, Jim was part of a small ration party tasked with picking up the battalion's food. During their expedition, the enemy began to shell their lines. Eyewitnesses reported that Jim was hit on the head by a piece of shell and killed practically instantaneously by shrapnel in the chest. He was 45 years old. 3 weeks later, Private John McKean was also killed in action at Fleur, blown to pieces by an explosive shell while having tea with his mates in the reserve trenches. Alec and Norman McKean survived the war and returned home to their families around Port Campbell. For Jim's wife Mary, the tragedy of his loss was compounded by the death of her brother Thomas in June 1917. Following Jim's death, his grieving family inserted a short commemorative notice in the Melbourne Argus, which read, "Greater love hath no man than this." Jim's remains were buried in Saint-Bonjean Cemetery at Armentières. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William James McKean, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.